The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the Mercantile in Animas Forks, Colorado, and Felicity Danvers pressed her ink-stained fingers against the worn leather seat, steadying herself as dust billowed through the open window. It was August of 1878, and the mountain town sat nearly 11,000 feet above sea level, perched in a valley where few women ventured willingly. She had come anyway, traveling from Boston with nothing but 2 trunks, a heart full of hope, and fingers perpetually marked by the writer's trade she could not abandon. The driver opened the door, and Felicity stepped down onto the dusty street, her dark green traveling dress already showing signs of the long journey. The air was thinner here, harder to breathe, and she took a moment to steady herself before looking around the small mining town. Wooden buildings lined the single main street, most of them hastily constructed with raw lumber that had already begun to weather in the harsh mountain climate. "Miss Danvers," a deep voice called from her left, and she turned to see a tall man approaching. He wore dusty denims, a worn brown shirt, and a hat that had seen better days. His face was tanned from long hours in the sun, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though he was not smiling now. He looked to be in his late 20s, perhaps 30 at most, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. "Yes," she said, extending her hand automatically before remembering the ink stains. She started to pull back, but he had already taken her hand in his own much larger one. "Donovan Richards," he said, his gray eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her feel both seen and exposed. "I am pleased you made it safely. The mountain roads can be treacherous this time of year with afternoon storms." "The journey was long but manageable," Felicity replied, acutely aware that he had not released her hand immediately. When he did, he glanced down at his own palm, now bearing a faint smudge of blue ink. His eyebrows rose slightly. "You have ink on your fingers." "Yes," she said, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "I write. I could not stop myself even on the journey. There was so much to observe, to document, to capture in words." Something shifted in his expression, a softening around those lines near his eyes. "Then write our love story," he said quietly, surprising them both with the words. He cleared his throat, looking almost embarrassed. "I mean, write about your experiences here. The mountains, the town, whatever strikes your interest. I would not want you to give up something that clearly means so much to you." Felicity stared at him, trying to reconcile this response with what she had expected. The letters they had exchanged over the past 6 months had been practical, discussing the realities of ranch life and her willingness to work hard. He had mentioned needing a wife to help manage his growing cattle operation, and she had been honest about her desperate need to escape Boston and the suffocating expectations of her family. Neither had mentioned love or romance or accepting each other's peculiarities. "You are not bothered by it?" she asked carefully. "Why would I be bothered by a woman who can read and write well enough to stain her fingers with ink?" Donovan picked up one of her trunks as though it weighed nothing. "My ranch is about 5 miles outside town. We should get moving before the afternoon storms roll in." "Can you ride?" "I can," Felicity said, though she had not been on a horse in over a year. He gestured toward 2 horses tied to the post outside the Mercantile. One was a sturdy bay gelding, the other a smaller chestnut mare with a white blaze. "The mare is gentle. Her name is Pepper." As Donovan secured her trunks behind the saddles, the Mercantile door opened and a woman emerged. She was perhaps 50, with graying blonde hair and a face that had weathered many Colorado winters. Her expression was curious, but not unkind as she looked Felicity over. "So you are the mail-order bride from Boston," the woman said. "I am Margaret Sullivan. I run the Mercantile with my husband. Welcome to Animas Forks, though I cannot imagine what possessed you to answer an advertisement for a wife in a place like this." "I needed a change," Felicity said simply. Margaret laughed, a surprisingly warm sound. "Well, you certainly got one. Donovan is a good man, one of the few around here with any sense. Treats his animals well, pays his debts, and does not spend all his money on whiskey and gambling like some of the miners. You could have done worse." "Thank you," Felicity said, unsure how else to respond. Donovan finished securing the trunks and helped Felicity mount the mare. His hands were strong and steady at her waist, and she found herself noticing details she had not gleaned from his letters. The way his hair curled slightly at his temple, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the calluses on his hands that spoke of hard work. They rode out of town in silence at first, following a narrow road that wound through stands of aspen and pine. The mountains rose dramatically on all sides, their peaks still holding snow even in August. Felicity had never seen landscape like this, so vast and wild and beautiful. Her fingers itched for pen and paper. "How long have you had the ranch?" she asked finally, breaking the silence. "5 years," Donovan replied, his eyes scanning the terrain with the practiced awareness of someone who knew every rock and tree. "I bought the land with money I saved from working in the silver mines. The work nearly killed me twice, but it gave me enough to start fresh. I have about 300 head of cattle now, 20 horses, and more land than I can properly manage alone." "Is that why you wanted a wife? For help with the work?" He was quiet for a moment, and she thought perhaps she had offended him. But when he spoke, his voice was thoughtful rather than angry. "Partly. The work is endless and I do need help, but also because I was tired of being alone. This is beautiful country, Miss Danvers, but it can be a lonely existence. I wanted someone to share it with, someone to build something with. When I read your letter, the way you described your love of words and stories, I thought perhaps you might understand." "Understand what?" "That there is more to life than just surviving. That we should try to find beauty and meaning in our days, not just work ourselves to death chasing after comfort that never comes." Felicity studied his profile as they rode. This was not what she had expected from a rancher in the Colorado mountains. She had braced herself for a rough, uneducated man who would see her as little more than an extra pair of hands and a means to produce children. Instead, she found herself riding beside someone who spoke of beauty and meaning with genuine conviction. "Why did you really leave Boston?" Donovan asked, turning to look at her directly. The question caught her off guard, and she considered lying or deflecting, but something in his steady gaze made her want to be honest. "My father wanted me to marry a banker named Herbert Crowley. He was 43, already had 3 children from his first wife who died, and he made it very clear that he expected me to give up my writing entirely. He said it was an unseemly hobby for a wife. And you did not want to give it up." "I cannot give it up," Felicity said fiercely. "Writing is not a hobby for me, Mr. Richards. It is as necessary as breathing. When I do not write, I feel as though I am slowly suffocating. My father could not understand that. He thought I was being ridiculous and ungrateful. 'Call me Donovan,' he said. And for what it is worth, I do not think you are being ridiculous. We all need something that makes us feel alive. For me, it is working with the horses, training them, learning their individual personalities. Some people do not understand why I spend so much time on it when I could just break them hard and fast. But there is something about earning a horse's trust that feeds my soul." They rode in companionable silence for a while longer, and Felicity felt some of the tension she had been carrying since leaving Boston begin to ease. Perhaps this arrangement would not be as difficult as she had feared. The ranch came into view as they crested a rise. It was nestled in a small valley with a creek running through it, the water sparkling in the afternoon sun. The main house was modest but well built, a log structure with a covered porch and glass windows, which Felicity knew were expensive this far from civilization. A large barn stood nearby, along with several corrals and outbuildings. "It is beautiful," Felicity said sincerely. Donovan's face lit up with unmistakable pride. "I built most of it myself. The house took 2 summers, and I am still working on improvements. There is a root cellar out back, a smokehouse, and I am planning to build a proper bunkhouse next spring for hired help." As they approached, a dog came bounding out from the barn, a large black and white shepherd mix with alert, intelligent eyes. The dog circled their horses, tail wagging enthusiastically. "That is Scout," Donovan said. "He is friendly but takes his guarding duties seriously. He will warm up to you quickly." Donovan dismounted and came around to help Felicity down. This time she was more aware of the strength in his hands, the way he steadied her until her feet were firmly on the ground. Scout immediately came over to sniff her skirts, and she reached down to let him smell her hand. "Hello, Scout," she said softly. The dog's tail wagged harder and he pressed his head against her leg. "He likes you," Donovan observed. "That is a good sign. He is usually more reserved with strangers." Donovan showed her into the house, carrying both her trunks easily. The interior was clean and surprisingly well appointed for a bachelor rancher. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace, a sturdy table and chairs, and shelves lined with books. Felicity moved immediately to the shelves, her fingers trailing over the spines. There were dime novels, agricultural texts, a worn copy of Homer's Odyssey, and several volumes of poetry. "You read Homer?" she asked, surprised. "My mother was a school teacher before she married my father," Donovan explained, setting down her trunks. "She made sure I learned to read and appreciate literature. She died when I was 16, but she gave me a love of books before she went. I am sorry for your loss. It was a long time ago." He gestured to a door on the left side of the room. "That is the bedroom. I have been sleeping out in the barn the past week, giving you privacy until we sort out the arrangements." Felicity turned to face him, her heart beating faster. They had not discussed the more intimate aspects of their arrangement in their letters, and she realized now that she had no idea what he expected. And what arrangements would those be? Donovan removed his hat and ran a hand through his hair, looking uncomfortable for the first time since she had met him. "I know this is an unusual situation, Miss Danvers. Felicity, if I may call you that. We are essentially strangers who have agreed to marry based on letters and desperation. I do not want you to feel pressured into anything you are not ready for. I thought perhaps we could take some time to get to know each other before we make the arrangement permanent." "You want to court me?" Felicity asked, trying to understand. "Even though I traveled all this way specifically to marry you, I want us both to be certain," he said quietly. "Marriage is difficult enough without starting from a place of resentment or regret. If you decide I am not what you want, I will pay your passage back to Boston or wherever you wish to go. No obligations." Felicity stared at him, completely taken aback. She had prepared herself for many possibilities on the journey west, but this gentle consideration had not been one of them. "That is very generous." "It is practical," Donovan corrected. "An unhappy wife makes for a miserable home, and I have no desire to trap anyone into a life they do not want. And if I decide to stay, if we both decide we suit each other," his gray eyes met hers steadily, "then we will marry properly, with the traveling preacher who comes through once a month. And we will build a life together as partners." The word partners resonated with Felicity. Not master and servant, not even husband and wife in the traditional sense, but partners. "I would like that," she said. "I would like the chance to know you before we make irrevocable decisions." Donovan smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face and made him look younger. "Good. I am glad. Now you must be exhausted from your journey. Why do not you settle in while I take care of the horses and start on evening chores? There is a pump out back for fresh water, and I laid in supplies so you would have what you need. If you do not know how to cook, I will not hold it against you. I have been feeding myself for years." "I can cook," Felicity assured him. "Though I warn you, my skills are adequate rather than exceptional." "Adequate is better than what I usually manage," he said with a grin. "I will be back in a few hours. Make yourself at home." After he left, Felicity stood in the center of the main room, trying to absorb everything that had happened in the past few hours. She had expected a rough, demanding man who would see her as property. Instead, she had found someone who quoted poetry, respected her need to write, and wanted to court her properly despite their unusual circumstances. She unpacked her trunks, hanging her few dresses on pegs in the bedroom and arranging her most precious possessions on the small table by the window. Her writing supplies, several filled journals, and the photograph of her mother who had died when Felicity was 12. The room was simple but comfortable, with a real mattress on the bed and quilts that looked handmade. Then she explored the rest of the house, taking inventory of the supplies Donovan had mentioned. There was flour, cornmeal, salt, sugar, coffee, dried beans, and salt pork. A small garden behind the house provided potatoes, carrots, and onions. It was more than enough to work with. As the afternoon wore on, Felicity prepared a simple meal of beans, salt pork, and cornbread. She found herself moving around the kitchen with surprising ease, imagining what it would be like to do this every day, to build a life in this remote mountain valley. Through the window, she could see Donovan working with one of the horses in the corral, his movements patient and deliberate. Scout lay nearby, watching his master with devoted attention. When Donovan returned to the house as the sun was setting, he stopped in the doorway and breathed deeply. "That smells wonderful." "It is just beans and cornbread," Felicity said, feeling suddenly shy. "I have lived on burned beans and hard tack for weeks at a time," Donovan replied, washing his hands in the basin by the door. "This is a feast." They sat down to eat together, and Felicity realized this was the first time in years she had shared a meal with someone who actually wanted her company. Her father's table had always been tense, full of criticism and demands. This was different. Donovan asked about her journey about Boston, about the places she had seen from the stagecoach. He listened when she spoke, actually listened, not just waiting for his turn to talk. "What will you write about here?" he asked, pushing his empty plate away with satisfaction. "Everything," Felicity said, her eyes lighting up. "The mountains, the light on the aspens, the sound of the creek at night, the way Scout herds the chickens even though no one asked him to. The challenge of cooking at this altitude, which I had not considered until the cornbread took twice as long to bake. There are stories everywhere here, Donovan." "I would like to read them," he said. "Your stories, if you would share them with me." No one had ever asked to read her work before. Her father had considered it a waste of time. Herbert Crowley had called it unseemly. But here was this rancher, this man who worked with his hands from sunup to sundown, asking to read her stories with genuine interest. "I would like that," she said softly. Over the following weeks, they settled into a routine that felt surprisingly natural. Felicity woke before dawn to help with morning chores, learning to milk the cow, gather eggs, and feed the chickens. Donovan taught her about the ranch, explaining his plans for expansion and improvement. In the afternoons, while he worked with the horses or rode out to check on the cattle, Felicity wrote. She filled page after page with observations and stories, capturing the rhythms of ranch life and the wild beauty of the Colorado mountains. Sometimes Donovan would read over her shoulder, and she would feel his presence like a warmth at her back. He never criticized or corrected, just absorbed her words with quiet appreciation. They talked endlessly during those first weeks, over breakfast, during chores, in the evenings by the fire. Felicity learned that Donovan had lost his father to a mining accident when he was 18, that he had worked for 5 brutal years in the silver mines before saving enough to buy his land. He told her about the first winter on the ranch, when he had nearly frozen to death in a blizzard, and learned to respect the power of mountain weather. Donovan learned about Felicity's childhood, about the mother who had encouraged her love of stories, and the father who had grown increasingly bitter after his wife's death. He learned about the years she had spent caring for her younger brothers until they were old enough to be sent away to school, and the loneliness of being the only woman in a house full of men who did not understand her. "Did you ever consider not answering my advertisement?" Donovan asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. "Every day until I got on the train," Felicity admitted. "I was terrified. What if you were cruel? What if the reality was nothing like the letters? What if I had made a terrible mistake?" And now, she turned to look at him, this man who had become so familiar to her in such a short time. "Now I think it might have been the best decision I ever made." Something shifted between them in that moment. Donovan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. His thumb brushed over the ink stains that had faded but never fully disappeared. "I am glad you came, Felicity. I know we agreed to take time to be certain, but I find myself already certain. You fit here. You fit with me." Her breath caught. "I feel it too. This sense of rightness, of being where I am supposed to be. I have never felt that before." "The traveling preacher comes through in 2 weeks, Donovan said, his gray eyes intent on hers. "If you are willing, if you are ready, we could make this official." "Yes," Felicity said without hesitation. "Yes, I am ready." Donovan smiled and leaned closer, and Felicity realized he was going to kiss her. Her heart hammered as his lips met hers, gentle at first, then deeper as she responded. It was her first real kiss, and it felt like coming home. Over the next 2 weeks, they prepared for the wedding. Margaret Sullivan helped Felicity alter one of her nicer dresses, adding lace from her own wedding gown. The few other ranching families in the area were invited, though the guest list remained small. Life this high in the mountains was sparse, with neighbors sometimes miles apart. Donovan built Felicity a writing desk, working on it in the barn and presenting it to her 3 days before the wedding. It was beautiful, crafted from smooth pine with careful attention to detail. There were cubbyholes for papers and ink, a drawer for finished manuscripts, and a surface large enough to spread out her work. "Donovan, this is too much," Felicity protested, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "It is not nearly enough," he replied. "You need a proper space to write, not the kitchen table or your lap. I want you to know that I support this part of you, that I value it." Felicity threw her arms around his neck, surprising them both. "Thank you. No one has ever understood before." He held her close, his face buried in her hair. "I will always understand. I promise you that." The wedding took place on a clear September morning. The traveling preacher, Reverend Thomas, was a jovial man in his 60s who had been performing marriages and baptisms in remote Colorado communities for over 20 years. He seemed unsurprised by the mail-order bride arrangement, having witnessed countless similar marriages in mining and ranching country. Felicity, wore her altered blue dress with lace at the collar and cuffs. Margaret had woven wildflowers into her hair. Donovan wore his best shirt and had trimmed his hair, looking both handsome and nervous as he waited for her on the porch. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When Donovan said his vows, his voice was steady and sure. "I promise to respect you, protect you, and support your dreams as much as my own. I promise to build a life with you that honors both of us, and I promise to love you for all my days." Felicity's voice shook slightly as she responded, "I promise to stand beside you in hardship and joy. I promise to help build the life we both envision, and I promise to love you with all that I am." When Reverend Thomas pronounced them married, Donovan kissed her with gentle passion while their small gathering of neighbors applauded. Margaret Sullivan had tears in her eyes. The celebration afterward was modest but joyful. Margaret had brought a cake, and one of the neighboring ranchers contributed a jug of whiskey. They ate and drank and talked as the afternoon wore on, and Felicity found herself laughing more than she had in years. These people, these tough mountain folk, had welcomed her without reservation. As evening fell and the last of their guests departed, Felicity and Donovan found themselves alone together for the first time as husband and wife. The reality of what came next made Felicity nervous, but when Donovan took her hand and led her to the bedroom, his touch was gentle and reassuring. "We go at your pace," he said quietly. "There is no rush." But Felicity found she did not want to wait. This man had shown her nothing but kindness and respect. He had valued her mind and her dreams. She wanted to know him fully, to complete the bond they had been building since the day she arrived. Their wedding night was tender and sometimes awkward, but also beautiful in its honesty. Donovan was patient, attentive to her responses, and Felicity felt herself falling even more deeply in love with this man who treated her like a treasure. Afterward, lying in his arms as moonlight streamed through the window, Felicity traced patterns on his chest. "I did not know it could be like this," she admitted softly. "Like what?" Donovan asked, his fingers running through her unbound hair. "This feeling of partnership, of genuine care. I thought marriage was about duty and obligation, but this feels like something else entirely." "This is what it should be," Donovan said. "Two people choosing each other every day, over and over again." As autumn progressed and the aspens turned brilliant gold against the evergreens, Felicity settled fully into her new life. She learned to handle a rifle when Donovan insisted. She knew how to protect herself from the occasional mountain lion or bear. She became adept at reading the weather signs that Donovan pointed out, knowing when to secure the livestock before a storm rolled in. Her writing flourished in ways it never had in Boston. She wrote stories about ranch life, about the people she met in town, about the landscape that surrounded them. Donovan read everything she wrote, offering thoughtful comments and encouragement. One evening in October, Donovan came in from the barn with an unusual expression on his face. "I have something I want to show you," he said. He led her out to the barn where a young colt stood on wobbly legs beside his mother. The foal was bay like his dam, with 4 white socks and a white star on his forehead. "He was born this afternoon," Donovan said, his voice filled with pride and wonder. "I have been waiting for this breeding to come through for 2 years. This colt has excellent bloodlines. He could be the foundation for a real horse breeding operation." Felicity watched her husband's face as he examined the foal, noting every detail, already planning the future. This was the dream he had been working toward, she realized. Not just a cattle ranch, but a place known for quality horses. "What will you name him?" she asked. Donovan thought for a moment, then smiled. "Promise, because he represents the promise of everything we are building here. That winter tested them in ways Felicity had not anticipated. The snow came early and heavy, trapping them in the valley for weeks at a time. The temperature dropped so low that water froze in the house overnight. They worked from before dawn until after dark, caring for the animals, hauling water, chopping wood, doing whatever it took to keep everything alive until spring. It was brutal work, exhausting and relentless. But Felicity found strength she had not known she possessed. More than that, she discovered that facing hardship alongside Donovan only strengthened their bond. They worked as a team, each supporting the other, and found warmth in their bed at night that had nothing to do with the fire in the hearth. On the worst nights, when the wind howled like demons and the cold seemed to seep into their very bones, Donovan would read aloud from Felicity's stories while she worked on mending or knitting. The sound of his voice, bringing her words to life, made the harsh winter evenings almost magical. "You should try to publish these," Donovan said one February night, setting down the pages he had been reading. "These stories are good, Felicity. They deserve a wider audience. Publishers in New York or Boston would not be interested in stories about ranch life in Colorado," Felicity protested. "How do you know unless you try?" Donovan challenged. "Besides, there are publishers in Denver now. The territory is growing. People want to read about the West." The idea took root in Felicity's mind. In March, as the worst of winter began to break, she carefully copied out 3 of her best stories and sent them to a publisher in Denver, whose advertisement she had seen in a newspaper Donovan brought back from town. Spring brought new challenges and new joys. The calving season kept them both working around the clock, helping cows through difficult births and protecting newborn calves from late-season snowstorms and predators. The colt, Promise, grew strong and bold, following Donovan around like a puppy whenever he was turned out in the corral. In May, a letter arrived from Denver. Felicity stared at the envelope for a full minute before she could bring herself to open it, terrified of rejection. But when she finally unfolded the letter, tears sprang to her eyes. "They want to publish one of my stories," she said, her voice shaking. "They are starting a monthly magazine focused on life in the Western Territories, and they want to feature my story about our first winter on the ranch. And they want more. They are asking if I can submit additional work." Donovan swept her up and spun her around, both of them laughing. "I knew it. I knew your work was good enough. They are going to pay me," Felicity said, still stunned. "Not a fortune, but actual money for my words." "You are a professional writer now," Donovan said, setting her down and cupping her face in his hands. "I am so proud of you." That summer, Felicity's story appeared in the inaugural issue of Western Frontiers magazine. Margaret Sullivan carried copies in the Mercantile, and Felicity found herself something of a minor celebrity in Animas Forks. The miners and ranchers who came through town wanted to meet the woman who had written about ranch life so vividly. More stories followed over the coming months. Felicity wrote about everything: the landscape, the animals, the people who made their lives in this harsh, beautiful land. She wrote about Donovan, though she changed his name in the stories. She captured his patience with the horses, his determination to build something lasting, his quiet strength in the face of adversity. In August, exactly 1 year after she had arrived in Animas Forks, Felicity realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another few weeks to be certain before saying anything to Donovan, but as September arrived and there was still no sign, she knew. She told him one evening after supper, her hands trembling slightly as she set down her coffee cup. "I am with child. The baby should come in early spring." Donovan's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, joy, fear, wonder, before settling on something that looked like awe. "A baby," he said softly. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Felicity asked, suddenly uncertain. "Happy." Donovan moved around the table and pulled her into his arms. "I am terrified and thrilled and more grateful than I can express. A child, Felicity. A family. You have given me everything." "We have given each other everything," she corrected. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the fall. Felicity continued to write, though she tired more easily as the baby grew. Margaret Sullivan visited frequently, bringing supplies and advice from her own experiences raising 4 children. The other ranch wives also stopped by when they could, creating a network of support that Felicity had never experienced in Boston. Winter came again, but this year they were better prepared. The root cellar was full, wood was stacked high, and extra hay had been put up for the livestock. Donovan had also hired a young man named Thomas Miller to help with the heaviest work, recognizing that he needed to be closer to the house in case Felicity needed him. The baby came on a March morning when snow was falling softly outside. Margaret Sullivan served as midwife, having attended countless births in mining camps and remote ranches. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Donovan, pacing anxiously in the main room, thought he might lose his mind from helplessness. But Felicity was strong, and shortly after dawn a baby's cry filled the house. Margaret emerged from the bedroom, tired but smiling. "You have a son. A healthy, strong son, and your wife is exhausted but well." Donovan rushed into the bedroom to find Felicity propped up against the pillows, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a quilt. Her hair was damp with sweat, her face pale with exhaustion, but her expression was radiant. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Donovan approached almost reverently, looking down at the tiny red face visible within the quilt. The baby had a shock of dark hair and a surprisingly strong grip when Donovan offered his finger. "He is perfect," Donovan whispered. "You are perfect." "I do not have words for what I am feeling right now." "Then write our love story," Felicity said, echoing his words from the day she arrived. "Write it so our son will know how we began. How a woman with ink-stained fingers arrived in Colorado and found a love she never expected." "What should we name him?" Donovan asked. They had discussed names for months but had never settled on anything definite. Now, looking at their son, Felicity said, "Daniel, after your father." Donovan's eyes filled with tears. His father had died in the mines before ever seeing the ranch Donovan built. "Daniel Richards," he said. "It is a good, strong name." The early months with Daniel were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. The baby was healthy and hungry, keeping them both awake at all hours. Felicity found it nearly impossible to write with a newborn demanding her constant attention. And some days, she felt as though she might lose herself entirely in the endless cycle of feeding, changing, and soothing. Donovan, sensing her frustration, hired Margaret Sullivan's daughter to come help a few hours each day. With Emily Sullivan watching the baby, Felicity could snatch a few precious hours to write, and she found those stolen moments of creativity kept her sane. By summer, they had settled into a new routine that accommodated their growing family. Daniel was a happy baby who seemed fascinated by everything around him. Donovan took to carrying him in a sling while he worked, pointing out horses and cattle, and teaching him about ranch life before the child could even understand words. Felicity captured it all in her writing. The publisher in Denver continued to request more stories, and she had developed a loyal following of readers who appreciated her honest, detailed accounts of frontier life. She wrote about the challenges of motherhood in an isolated mountain ranch, the joy of watching her son discover the world, the deepening love between her and Donovan. When Daniel was 6 months old, A letter arrived that changed everything again. The publisher wanted to collect Felicity's stories into a book. They were offering an advance, not a large one by East Coast standards, but a significant sum for a first-time author. "A book," Felicity said, staring at the letter in disbelief. "They want to publish a book of my stories." Donovan read over her shoulder, his pride evident. "This is what you were meant to do, tell our stories, share this life with people who will never experience it themselves." "I could not have written any of this without you," Felicity said. "Without this life we have built. You gave me the freedom to be myself, to pursue my dreams. You gave me everything worth writing about." The book, titled Ink-Stained Fingers, Life and Love on a Colorado Ranch, was published the following spring. It sold better than anyone expected, particularly among women in eastern cities who were curious about life in the Western Territories. Felicity received letters from readers, some praising her work, others asking questions about ranch life, and a few from women considering their own journeys west. As Daniel grew into a curious toddler, Felicity found herself pregnant again. This time the baby, a daughter they named Frances after Felicity's mother, arrived with less drama on a beautiful October afternoon. Daniel, now 2 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister and insisted on helping care for her. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Donovan's horse breeding operation gained a reputation throughout Colorado for quality animals. Promise, now a magnificent stallion, sired foals that sold for premium prices. They hired more help, built the bunkhouse Donovan had dreamed of, and expanded the house to accommodate their growing family. Through it all, Felicity continued to write. She wrote about the expansion of the ranch, about raising children in the mountains, about the evolution of her marriage from tentative mail-order arrangement to deep, abiding love. Her second book, published when Frances was 1 year old, sold even better than the first. On a warm summer evening, when Daniel was 4 and Frances was 2, Felicity sat on the porch with Donovan, watching their children play in the yard under Scout's watchful eye. The old dog had slowed down considerably, but still took his protective duties seriously. "You ever regret it?" Donovan asked. "Giving up the life you could have had in Boston," Felicity laughed. "What life? A suffocating marriage to a man who wanted to silence the best part of me. Never. This right here is everything I never knew I wanted. You are everything I never knew I needed." "I think about that day you arrived," Donovan said, taking her ink-stained hand in his. "The stains never fully went away, and he would not have wanted them to. You stepped off that stagecoach looking terrified and determined, and I knew my life was about to change. I just did not know how much." "You told me to write our love story," Felicity reminded him, "and I have. Every day, in every word I put on paper, I am writing our love story, but also living it." "Have I told you today that I love you?" Donovan asked, pulling her closer. "Only twice," Felicity teased. "Clearly you are falling down on the job." He kissed her temple, then her cheek, then her lips. "I love you, and I will love you tomorrow and every day after that." The years flowed by, marked by the changing seasons and the rhythms of ranch life. Daniel grew into a serious boy who loved the horses as much as his father did. Frances was adventurous and bold, climbing trees and chasing the ranch dogs. 2 more children followed, another son named James and a daughter named Clara, filling the house with noise and laughter and the organized chaos of a large family. Felicity published 4 more books over the years, each one documenting different aspects of their life and the changing West. Her work gained recognition beyond Colorado, and she occasionally received invitations to speak at literary societies in Denver or even San Francisco. Donovan always encouraged her to go, taking over full responsibility for the children and ranch while she pursued these opportunities. But she never stayed away long. Her heart was here, in this mountain valley, with this man and the life they had built together. When Daniel turned 16, he began seriously working with the horses, showing a natural talent that surpassed even Donovan's considerable skill. Frances surprised everyone by declaring she wanted to be a veterinarian, one of the first women in Colorado to pursue such a profession. James was quieter, more intellectual, showing signs of his mother's love for words and stories. Clara, the baby, was still finding her way but showed promise of being the most stubborn of all of them. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Donovan and Felicity rode up into the mountains, leaving the children in the capable hands of the ranch foreman they had hired years before. They brought a picnic and blankets, finding a meadow filled with wildflowers that overlooked the entire valley. 20 years, Felicity said, leaning against Donovan as they watched clouds drift over the peaks. It has gone by so fast, and we have lived every moment of it, Donovan replied. You gave me a full life, Felicity, not just existing, not just surviving, but truly living. We gave that to each other, she corrected, as she always did. They made love in the meadow like they were young again, unhurried and tender, celebrating the bond that had only grown stronger over 2 decades. Afterward, as they lay wrapped in blankets watching the sky turn orange and gold with sunset, Donovan said, I want you to know something. If I could go back and choose again, knowing everything we would face, all the hardships and struggles and challenges, I would still choose you. Every time, without hesitation, I would choose you. Felicity felt tears slide down her temples. I would choose you too. Even knowing about the brutal winters and the endless work, and that time the cow kicked you and broke 2 ribs. Even knowing every difficult moment, I would choose this life with you over any other life imaginable. As they rode back to the ranch in the gathering darkness, Felicity thought about the young woman she had been 20 years ago, stepping off that stagecoach with ink-stained fingers and a desperate hope for something better. That woman could never have imagined the life she would build here, the love she would find, the family she would raise. She had come west as a mail-order bride, expecting at best a practical arrangement and at worst a mistake she would regret forever. Instead, she had found a partner who valued her mind as much as her work, who supported her dreams while building his own, who loved her not despite her quirks but because of them. And she had found her voice as a writer, documenting not just their story but the stories of all the people carving lives out of the harsh, beautiful landscape of the Colorado mountains. Her books sat on shelves in homes across the country, and she received letters regularly from readers who felt connected to her stories. But more than any professional success, more than any recognition or achievement, she had found home. Not just a place, but a feeling of absolute rightness, of being exactly where she was meant to be with exactly who she was meant to be with. The ranch lights glowed warm in the distance as they approached. Through the windows, Felicity could see her children moving about, probably arguing over whose turn it was to set the table or feed the dogs. The familiar chaos of family life awaited them, and she found herself eager to return to it. Scout, now grizzled with age, came out to greet them as they rode into the yard. Behind him, a younger dog, Scout's grandson, bounced enthusiastically. The horses in the corrals whinnied their welcomes. Smoke rose from the chimney, promising warmth and light and all the comforts of home. Donovan helped Felicity dismount, his hands as steady and sure as they had been that first day. But now there was a history in his touch, 20 years of shared experiences, of building a life together from nothing but hope and determination. Thank you, Felicity said, standing on her toes to kiss him. For what? For seeing me. That first day when I stepped off the stagecoach with ink on my fingers, you saw who I really was and you welcomed it. You told me to write our love story and you gave me a story worth writing. Donovan smiled, the same smile that still made her heart skip even after 20 years. I think you gave me the story, Felicity. I was just a lonely rancher trying to survive in the mountains. You brought the beauty and meaning I was searching for. You brought the love. They walked into the house together, into the warmth and noise and wonderful chaos of their family. Daniel was showing Francis something in a book about horse anatomy. James was writing in a journal at the kitchen table, following in his mother's footsteps. Clara was building something elaborate with wooden blocks, completely absorbed in her creation. As Felicity moved around the kitchen, preparing supper with the help of her daughters, she caught sight of her writing desk in the corner. On it sat her latest manuscript, nearly complete. This one was different from her other books. This one was the full story of how a mail-order bride with ink-stained fingers arrived in Colorado and found love with a rancher who saw her for exactly who she was. It was their story, the one Donovan had asked her to write that first day. She had been writing it all along, in pieces and fragments, but now she was putting it all together. The fear and hope of her arrival, the tentative courtship, the first winter they survived together, the joy of building a family, the challenges they had overcome, and the deep, abiding love that had sustained them through everything. That night, after the children were finally in bed and the house was quiet, Felicity sat at her desk while Donovan read by the fire. She picked up her pen, its familiar weight comfortable in her hand, and looked at the pages spread before her. The story was nearly complete, but not quite. It needed an ending. She thought about all the ways she could conclude their tale. She could write about the ranch's continued success, about their children's futures, about growing old together. All of those things were true and would happen, but they were not the real ending. The real ending, she realized, was that there was no ending. Their story continued every day. Every morning when Donovan brought her coffee while she wrote. Every evening when they stood together on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. Every moment they chose each other, over and over again, just as they had promised to do. She dipped her pen in ink and began to write. 20 years after the mail-order bride arrived with ink-stained fingers, she sat at the desk her husband built and realized that the love story he asked her to write had no ending. Love, true love, does not end. It grows and changes and deepens, becoming more essential with each passing year. The ink-stained fingers that had worried her that first day became a symbol of her identity, of the part of herself she had feared she would have to surrender. But she never had to surrender anything. Instead, she found a partner who celebrated every part of her, who built her a desk and read her stories and encouraged her dreams. She found a man who saw her completely and loved her entirely. And together, they wrote a love story that would endure as long as the mountains that surrounded them, as constant as the creek that ran through their valley, as true as the promises they made to each other on that September morning when they became husband and wife. This is how love should be. A daily choice, a constant recommitment, a story that continues to unfold with every sunrise. And if anyone asks how such a love is possible, tell them about the rancher and the writer, about ink-stained fingers and patient hands, about two lonely people who took a chance on an advertisement and found everything they never knew they needed. Felicity set down her pen and flexed her ink-stained fingers, smiling at the familiar marks. Donovan looked up from his book and caught her smile. "Finished?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "I finished our story. Can I read it?" Felicity gathered the pages and brought them to him, settling beside him on the couch. Donovan wrapped one arm around her and held the manuscript with the other, beginning to read while Felicity listened to his steady heartbeat. This was peace, she thought. This was happiness. Not the absence of difficulty or challenge, but the presence of love strong enough to weather anything. They had built something rare and precious here in this remote mountain valley, a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection. A family filled with love and possibility. A life that honored both of their dreams while creating new dreams they shared. The fire crackled softly. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines. Somewhere in the house, one of the children coughed in their sleep and then settled. Scout's grandson padded through the room, checking on his charges before settling by the hearth. These were the sounds of home, Felicity thought. The sounds of the life she had chosen, the life that had chosen her. When she had stepped off that stagecoach 20 years ago, terrified and hopeful, she could never have imagined all of this. The love, the success, the family, the absolute rightness of it all. Donovan finished reading and set the manuscript aside. His eyes were bright with emotion as he pulled her closer. "It is beautiful. You captured everything perfectly. Did I get it right? Our story." "You got it exactly right," he assured her, "though you were too modest about your own role. You make it sound as though I gave you everything, but Felicity, you gave me just as much. More even. You gave me purpose beyond mere survival. You gave me a reason to build something lasting. You gave me love and family and meaning." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn low. Eventually, Felicity said, "I want to submit this to the publisher, but I want to dedicate it to you. Is that acceptable? I would be honored." "What should the dedication say?" Donovan thought for a moment, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. "To Donovan, who told me to write our love story and then gave me a story worth telling." Felicity smiled. "Perfect." The book, when it was published the following year, became Felicity's most successful work. Readers responded to the honest, heartfelt account of how a mail-order bride arrangement became a true love story. The dedication, simple but profound, resonated with people who understood that the best love stories were not the dramatic, turbulent ones but the steady, enduring ones built on mutual respect and daily choosing. As their silver anniversary approached, then their 30th, then their 35th, Donovan and Felicity continued to build their life together. The ranch prospered under Daniel's management when Donovan began to slow down. Frances indeed became a veterinarian, one of the first women in Colorado to do so, and she often returned home to help with the livestock. James became a teacher and writer, following his mother's literary footsteps. Clara married a rancher from the next valley and started her own family. Grandchildren arrived, filling the house once again with young voices and energy. Felicity found herself writing different stories now, ones for children, inspired by her grandchildren's questions and adventures. These books also found an audience, and she became known not just as a chronicler of Western life, but as an author for multiple generations. Through it all, through every joy and sorrow, every triumph and setback, Donovan and Felicity remained each other's constant. They had built something that lasted, something that mattered. Not just a successful ranch or a literary career, but a genuine partnership based on love and respect and the daily choice to honor each other. On their 40th anniversary, they once again rode up into the mountains. They were older now, moving more slowly, but the meadow was still there, still filled with wildflowers. They spread their blanket and lay together watching the clouds drift across the endless sky. 40 years, Donovan said, his voice rough with age but still strong. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you stepped off that stagecoach. Other times it feels like you have been with me forever. Both are true, Felicity replied, her hair now more silver than dark. We have built forever together, one day at a time. Would you do it again? Donovan asked. If you knew everything that would happen, every joy and sorrow, every challenge and triumph, would you still get on that train in Boston? Felicity turned to look at him, at the face she loved more than any other, now weathered with age and experience. Without hesitation. Every time. In every version of my life, I would choose you. I love you, Donovan said, the same words he had spoken countless times over 40 years, and yet they still held the power to make her heart race. I love you too, Felicity replied. Until the mountains crumble and the stars fall from the sky, I will love you. They lay together as the sun set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple and rose. The same mountains that had witnessed their first tentative steps toward love now stood eternal witness to a love that had endured 4 decades. The same peaks that had challenged them with brutal winters and summer droughts now sheltered a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. Their children would carry on the ranch and the stories. Their grandchildren would know the tale of how great-grandmother arrived with ink-stained fingers and great-grandfather told her to write their love story. And perhaps, someday in the future, someone else would read Felicity's books and understand that real love was not the dramatic passion of dime novels, but the steady, enduring choice to honor and cherish another person through all the days of your life. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, Donovan helped Felicity to her feet. They were slower now, stiffer, but they still moved together with the ease of long practice. They rode back to the ranch through the familiar darkness, guided by starlight and the knowledge of every rock and tree along the path. The ranch lights glowed warm in the distance. Their family waited there, the children and grandchildren who were their legacy. But more than that, waiting there was the life they had built together. Every board and beam of it constructed with love and partnership and unwavering commitment to each other. Felicity thought about the young woman she had been, arriving in Animas Forks with ink-stained fingers and a desperate hope for something better than the life she was leaving behind. That woman had been brave enough to take a chance on an advertisement, courageous enough to journey across the country to meet a stranger, strong enough to build a life in the harsh, beautiful mountains of Colorado. But that young woman had not been prepared for the depth of love she would find, for the partnership that would define her life, for the joy of building something meaningful alongside someone who truly saw her and valued her exactly as she was. Donovan had told her to write their love story, and she had. She had written it in books and manuscripts, in letters and journals, but more than that, she had lived it. Every day, in every choice she made, in every word of support and encouragement, in every moment of standing beside him through hardship and joy, she had written their love story, and it was beautiful. As they reached the barn and dismounted for the last time that evening, Felicity paused to look at the house they had shared for 40 years. Light spilled from the windows, warm and welcoming. Smoke rose from the chimney. Voices drifted out, the sounds of family gathered together. This was home. Not just a place, but a feeling, a certainty, a love that had sustained her through 4 decades, and would sustain her through whatever years remained. She had arrived as a mail-order bride, expecting at best a practical arrangement. Instead, she had found everything she had never dared to dream of. Donovan took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. Even now, after 40 years, his touch could make her heart flutter. "Ready to go in?" he asked. "Always," Felicity replied. "As long as I am going in with you." They walked into the house together, into the warmth and light and love that they had created. The story that began with ink-stained fingers and a rancher's surprising request had become a legacy that would endure, not because it was perfect or without struggle, but because it was real. Because two people had chosen each other and continued to choose each other every single day. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Felicity sat once more at her writing desk. She opened a fresh journal and dipped her pen in ink. On the first page, in her familiar flowing script, she wrote, "This is how you write a love story, not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but with daily choices, with respect and partnership, with unwavering support for each other's dreams, with patience through difficulties and joy in simple moments, with ink-stained fingers and calloused hands building a life together, one day at a time, until those days become years and those years become a lifetime. This is how you write a love story that endures." She set down her pen and looked at the ink stains on her fingers, the same marks that had been there that first day 40 years ago. They had never fully faded, and she was glad. They were a reminder of who she was, of the dreams she had refused to surrender, of the man who had told her to keep those dreams and helped her achieve them. Donovan appeared in the doorway, watching her with a soft smile. "Coming to bed?" "Yes," Felicity said, closing the journal. There would be time for more writing tomorrow, and all the days after that. For now, she wanted to lie beside her husband, the man who had seen her truly from the very first moment, the man who had given her everything by simply accepting everything she was. As they lay together in the darkness, Felicity felt profound gratitude wash over her. Gratitude for the courage to answer that advertisement, for the stagecoach that had brought her to Animas Forks, for the ink-stained fingers that had somehow caught a rancher's attention and prompted him to say something that would change both their lives. "Write our love story," he had said. And she had. Oh, how she had. In words and in deeds, in books and in the life they had built together. Their love story was written in every board of the house, every fence post on the ranch, every child and grandchild who carried their legacy forward. It was written in the mountains that surrounded them and the sky that stretched endlessly above. But most of all, it was written in their hearts, in the deep abiding love that had sustained them through 40 years and would endure as long as they both drew breath. This was their love story, and it was beautiful in its simplicity and profound in its truth. A mail-order bride had arrived with ink-stained fingers, and a rancher had told her to write their love story. And in doing so, they had created something rare and precious and utterly true. A love that endured, a partnership that honored both, a life that celebrated the unique gifts each brought to their union. This was how love should be, Felicity thought as sleep began to claim her. Not the surrender of self, but the celebration of two selves choosing to build something together. Not the diminishment of dreams, but the support of each other's aspirations. Not duty and obligation, but genuine affection and respect, and the daily choice to honor the person you loved most. Donovan's breathing deepened beside her, and Felicity smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow they would wake and begin another day, working together, supporting each other, continuing to write their love story with every choice they made. And that was exactly how it should be. The mountains stood eternal watch over the sleeping ranch. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. And in the house that love built, two people who had taken a chance on each other 4 decades ago slept peacefully, surrounded by the legacy they had created together. Their story, written in ink and lived in truth, would endure long after they were gone, a testament to the power of choosing love every single day.